Welcome to Discovery Week here at Seaton Tramway. This week we will be taking you behind the scenes to all the things you don't really get to see when you're visiting Seaton Tramway. And because you can't come to us right now, we thought we'd come to you to show you all the ins and outs on how Seaton Tramway works. So sit back, strap in, and today let's find out how a tram works. Before we start, let's understand the history of transport and where trams first came into service. The first passenger trams began as horse-drawn trams in the 1800s, originating in Wales in 1807, with the first street tramway appearing in Birkenhead in 1860. Through their history, trams have been powered in a variety of ways: horse-drawn, steam, cable-hauled, gas, and like we use here at Seaton Tramway, electric. Trams quickly became popular throughout the industrialised world. The first electric tram line operated in Russia. The oldest electric railway in the UK is the Volks Electric Railway in Brighton, which opened in 1883, followed by Blackpool Tramway in 1885. Trams were the cheap and easy alternative for public transport until the early 1900s, when buses became the favoured choice for travel. But where does Seaton Tramway fit in? After the branch line closed between Seaton and Seaton Junction in 1966, Claude Lane was trying to find a new home for his fleet of trams after operating in Eastbourne for the previous 16 years. And the branch line here at Seaton was the perfect home for his tramway. So after the sale was agreed, the first tram left here at Riverside Depot on August 28, 1970. And 50 years later, we have a fleet of 14 trams. But that's a story for another time. How does a tram work? Our trams range from 1904 to 2015, so every tram operates slightly differently on our track. But let's talk about how every tram operates on our 3-mile line. We are an electric tramway, which means we get our power from the national grid, which powers the entire country, including your home. Here is a dissection of a tram. The tram draws power from the overhead cable, which is carrying a supply of 120 volts. The driver operates the tram with the power controller. As he moves the controller handle around, this takes resistance out of the electrical circuit, which increases the flow of electrical current to the traction motors, which are mounted on the wheel sets underneath. The motors in turn are turning gears mounted on the axles, which then turn the wheels. The people sitting upstairs cannot get electric shock, even if they are silly enough to try and touch the wire. This is because the wire is positively charged, whilst the track acts as the negative. Therefore, to get a shock, you would have to touch the wire and the track at the same time. Each tram is equipped with 2 controllers, one at each end, one at the north end and one at the south end. The tram driver sits at the controller in the direction they want to travel, with their overhead trolley pole trailing. The controller is made of brass and copper contacts and allows the driver to regulate the current and control the amount of power given to the motors. This enables the driver to move at the correct and appropriate line speed. Here's Gareth to explain more about our tram controllers.
Thanks, Josh. Now, as mentioned, all the controllers are different in the trams. Some trams have the same controller, obviously. Here we're on tram 9. This is an air-top controller. Basically, let's run through the basis of the controller. You've got your key. This is the key. Without that, you can't go. If you want to go forwards, the key goes forwards. If you want to go backwards, the key goes backwards. I should say we do not drive trams in reverse, except in depot and odd situations. Okay, so we want to make the tram go. Another interesting fact with these is if we can pan down to the floor, we have a dead man switch. We'll talk about the dead man switch in a moment. To make the tram go forward, foot on the dead man switch, key forward, toot toot, we're not going to go anywhere because the power's off, and we take the air off. I'll do that again. We take the air off by releasing the air so the brakes come off, and then we go into first notch. The tram will start moving forward. We stay in series notches, no more than about 5 seconds. We move up into second notch, third notch and fourth notch. Generally, day-to-day running of the trams, we don't come out of fourth notch, we don't go into parallel, although this is a series parallel controller, so we can go up into parallel, and we've got another 4 notches into top notch if we really want to get that tram moving. The main thing with driving a tram is, once you're up to speed, is to return the controller back to off and coast as much as we can. That way we're not putting wear on the motors, we're not putting wear on the electricity bill, which is obviously quite a considerable amount. So there we go, basic operation. We've stopped, the air's come back on. Dead man, off. Now, if I let the air off, you hopefully can hear that. We're not going to go anywhere because we haven't got our foot on the dead man's. Okay, as mentioned earlier, let's talk about the dead man switch. Here it is down here, this little switch here. Looks a little like a sewing machine treadle. Without that depressed, if you try to put it into forward drive and let the brakes off, the brakes come off. The minute I take my foot off that, listen for this, brakes come back on. Dead man switch. It's a dead man switch for if the unfortunate happened, the driver fainted, or worse, or the driver fell off the tram. That's going to release and the brakes are going to come on, and even if you're trundling along at the heady speeds of 12 miles an hour, the tram will still come to a stop in a very short time. So, purpose of a dead man switch is to bring the tram to a halt should something happen to the driver where he can't brake the tram himself.
Fun fact, our trams are powered by 120 volts DC. Now this is different from the power that comes from the national grid, which is 230 volts AC. Now you may see up and down our line battery rooms, much like the one I'm stood in now. Now this is where the rectifiers change the 230 volts AC to the 120 volts DC that is needed to power our trams. Can you tell us the difference between AC and DC? And here is Nicola to explain how a simple circuit works.
So here we have a simple circuit made up of a bulb in a bulb holder, a couple of wires and a battery in a battery holder. And as you can see, the electricity is flowing around the circuit and lighting the bulb. But if I was to break the circuit by removing one of the clips and taking the wire off, obviously the bulb has gone out, and that means that the electricity is unable to flow around the circuit. And it takes all these steps to ensure that the circuit is able to operate our motors at the tramway in the same way. Can you think of anything at home that might operate a circuit in the same way? For example, you may have dimmer switches on your lights at home, and the dimmer switch is actually regulating the electricity flow to the bulbs.
Here is the inside of one of our controllers.
Okay, let's talk about the overhead. You probably noticed that if we can get the cameraman to pan up, all our trams are connected to the overhead via a trolley pole. The trolley pole in this instance is at this end of the tram, because this tram is being put away, and we work off DC voltage. The line is split up into 6 sections, and they're all fed by individual battery banks, lead acid batteries, and we should be able to keep going if we have a power cut for about 24 hours. So if the national grid goes down, Seaton Tramway won't. We'll carry on operating, as I say, for about a day. In the early days, we didn't have an overhead up for the first few years, so what we did, battery cars. In other words, a little truck that was towed behind the tram, trolley pole was tied down, connected to those batteries. We used to charge them overnight, and the trams would trundle up and down with their own, basically, battery pack in, a little bit like a milk float. Okay, let's talk a little bit about point work on the tramway. I'm sure you're all aware that trams travel on rails, just like trains. A lot of our points at Seaton Tramway are sprung. This set isn't sprung, this is a lever operated, weight operated point. You'll see it's set to the left because generally we always go in the direction of travel to the left of a loop when we come to the loop. However, This is our riverside point, and this is used mainly for getting back into the depot. Lever operated. If you watch the point, we put him over and the point changes, and now the tram will go to the right. If you look above the point, just down slightly, there's one of our frogs, which is basically an overhead point. If you think of it as a point, but for the trolley pole, you won't go far wrong. These are all set to travel left. So if we're going into the depot here, we go past the point, the trolley pole will go the wrong way. Once we're through that frog, we'll take the trolley off manually and swap to the other way so we can go into the depot.
Thank you for joining us today at Seaton Tramway. We hope you've discovered how a tram works and how Seaton Tramway is one big circuit. Why not join us next time where we'll discover how to maintain a tramway. See you next time. Thanks again for watching. COVID-19 and the lockdown has created difficult times across the industries we share with heritage railways and leisure. Railways and tramways like ours survive because of the amazing support we get from our visitors and passengers through donations and ticket sales. In a time where people are rightly self-isolating, charities' futures can be put at risk. If you'd like to support us here at Seaton Tramway, you can donate, purchase a gift voucher or loyalty card, or visit our shop, all via tram.co.uk. Discovery Week is made possible by the National Lottery Heritage Fund.